Hey everybody, I'm Ashleigh Banfield and this is Drop Dead Serious. I always say it. I say make sure you subscribe so that you never miss a bonus episode. And I mean it, because this is a bonus episode on something that happened in Idaho today. I had to talk to you about it. I had to talk to Brian Entin about it. So this was supposed to be the last hearing in the Kohberger case before the trial starts this summer. And it was not. It was not because of all the things that were brought up in the hearing. The biggest thing that was brought up today was the effect of the Dateline NBC 2-hour special that revealed so much sourced information about the case last week that suddenly everybody on the case is at Twitter, like freaking out. Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger's lawyer, not happy about what was revealed in the Dateline documentary. The judge in the case, Judge Hippler, not happy that there is a leak, that somehow evidence in this case leaked despite an airtight gag order, right? It's been 2.5 years we've been under this gag order. We have barely found out anything. We always have to wait for a court document to drop for us to really get, legitimate information. But Dateline was just filled with details. Let me just go over a couple in case you didn't see it or if you need a refresher. Dateline had images from Bryan Kohberger's phone, images of college girls from Washington State University and University of Idaho. Some talk that there are connections between those girls and the victims in the house. Also, surveillance video of the white car circling 1122 King Road on the night the murders actually happened, back and forth, coming back and almost making a bunch of different circles around the house, chickening out, coming back, chickening out, coming back. Dateline had those images. How about this? Searches that Bryan Kohberger allegedly made, searches for porn with really twisted words connected like forced, passed out, drugged. Also searches that involved Ted Bundy, a serial killer. And not only that, but selfies that Bryan Kohberger took of him wearing a black hood after the murders. And then there was his obsession with coverage of the murders at 1122 King Road. These were all the things and more that Dateline was able to get from a source. But who was the source? Well, this hearing today drilled down on that. The judge in the case wants an investigation, a special prosecutor to go over all the people involved in the prosecution and the police, all of their outgoing emails. In fact, the judge said, put a freeze, do not delete any of your digital information because we are going to investigate where this information leaked out to Dateline. Here's the thing. I talked to a prominent Idaho lawyer who said she would not be surprised if Ann Taylor and the defense team for Bryan Kohberger put a motion forward in this court to say either dismiss these charges because the jury pool's been tainted by all this leaked evidence outside the gag order, or I want that evidence that was listed in the Dateline documentary thrown out of the trial. Holy cow! Could it be possible that everything we learned in the Dateline special may end up being pulled from the case because it wasn't supposed to be leaked? All really good questions, as well as what can we expect, because they're down to the nitty-gritty on planning for the trial this summer. I had a very extensive conversation with Brian Entin about it. Here's our chat. So Brian, what are the odds that this Dateline special, which we all were so engrossed by, right? Just the details in it. What are the odds that those details may come back to sort of smack the actual case? That there's a possibility those pieces of evidence might actually get excluded from the case?
I mean, I would be shocked, Ashleigh, if those pieces of evidence got excluded from the case. They're obviously big parts of the case. I can't see the judge throwing those pieces of evidence out. Is it going to make it more complicated finding a jury? Yes. And it was already going to be hard because so many people know about this case, not only around the country, but especially in Idaho. And the judge pointed out in his motion that he filed when he was so upset, saying he basically wants an investigation, he pointed out that it's going to cost taxpayer money. He said what Dateline did is going to cost the taxpayers of Latah County because he thinks it's going to make jury selection that much harder.
Yeah, you can't blame Dateline. I mean, we're journalists, right? You stick a gag order on a case that is of such massive public importance, you're just going to force us to try to get sources elsewhere. I mean, it's another argument against gag orders because it causes this problem. But then again, I guess the information that was released is the information they wanted gagged. It's sort of a catch-22. But so I did read a comment from Edwina Elcox, who's a regular attorney that we interview on my NewsNation show, that she, and as an Idaho attorney, she said, I would not be surprised if Bryan Kohberger's defense team and Taylor, the lead, put in a motion to have all of that evidence excluded as a curative measure to try to fix the jury pool tainting that just happened with that 2-hour special.
Yeah, and I'm sure they will. I mean, they've put in motions to have all of the evidence excluded already. They're looking for any little thing they can. I guess what I just think back to, and you've covered a gazillion, jury selections. I mean, they're going to find people who don't know all of those details, hopefully, whether the stuff was on Dateline or not. And that was a big part of what they talked about in the hearing that I was in today here in Boise, Idaho, is, they're going to create this juror questionnaire. So not the voir dire, but before that, when they're going to bring these pools of jury, potential jurors in, they're going to give them a questionnaire that they're going to fill out. To weed them out from the very beginning. And then those questionnaires are going to go back to these rooms in the back where the defense and prosecution are, and they're just going to immediately start weeding people out. So is this going to make it harder? Yes. But do I think I think they can find jurors. They find them for all these cases. I mean, we're in the crime world. We're obsessed. There's a lot of people that are just going about life around here that have probably just heard of Bryan Kohberger and that 4 college kids were killed. But beyond that, they don't know all the ins and outs.
You're right. You're absolutely right, and that's something that I always bring up with the gag order issue. I think, look, you assume that every piece of information is going to be gobbled up by the entire population in the jury pool. That's not always the case. There's a lot of people out there who watch zero true crime. I don't know who they are, but but I do think that finding a jury in this particular case in Idaho is actually going to be hard. It's not about have you heard, right? Because everybody's going to have heard something. It's like OJ. It's can you be fair? And this is not Diddy. This is not something that doesn't really affect you. This affected everybody. They were so blown away by the horror. It was like a Manson kind of attack. It was, it was a Truman Capote in cold blood kind of attack. It made no sense. It made us all fear that we could be randomly picked like that. Yeah. So I feel like there are jurors in Idaho who felt like their innocence was stolen by this, so they're angry. So that it might be harder to find jurors because it comes down to, can you be fair? I know you've heard about it, but can you be fair? And I think a lot of them will say, no, I want to see him fry.
Well, and there's 2 other components, too, that are going to make it really hard. Number one, a 3-month trial. I mean, a 3-month trial. So you've got to find people that are willing to give up their lives for 3 months. And he gave the schedule today, 8:30 a.m. to 3:45 in the afternoon. And he was ending at 3:45 because if you had errands to run and you had to go to the bank or go to something, you have that hour and then you got to be back the next day for 3 months. And then he said, I don't plan on sequestering the jurors, but I'm not going to rule that out. And he said it a couple of times. He said, I don't want to say for sure no. As of now, I'm not planning on it. So that means that if something crazy happens during the trial, which happens where there's a juror that gets some information or something weird happens, he could decide to sequester them like a month in and suddenly they're in a hotel.
Well, let me tell you something. I think it's the worst thing you could possibly do is have a 3-month trial with sequestered jurors. You're too young to have been around for the OJ case, the 9-month sequestration, where the jurors were so mad that they were stuck for 9 months. They arrived with their verdict under 4 hours, right, of deliberations with their bags packed. They arrived at the courthouse to deliver their verdict with their bags packed as a big F-U, to the system and to the process. So I just think you're really limiting your jury pool if you tell them they're going to be sequestered for 3 months.
Yeah, no, fair. And he said today, too, well, if we end up sequestering, we're going to go much longer than 3:45. Actually, this judge, Judge Hippler, he means business. He is a strict intense man compared to Judge in Moscow, who just seemed like a nice guy. And like I saw him outside the courthouse. Hey, buddy, this guy is like, I mean, you don't break the rules. He went through a whole day of rules today. He told the attorneys, you will address each other as Mr. and Miss throughout the trial. And I know that this is going to get tense. It's 3 months, but you won't forget and you will be polite and you will say Mr. and Miss for the full 3 months. He said, if you turn the lights off to use the overhead projector, you're not going to turn the lights back on because that's distracting. So you have to make a decision. Do you want the lights off for the day or for a while, or do you want the lights on? Like, that's how detailed he was. The seating, nuts. I mean, the seating, he wants like an exact seating chart and how, I mean, so this guy is not playing around. That's why when people are like, oh, do you think the trial's going to get delayed? Like, no, it's not getting delayed. This man is like, He is sticking to the schedule.
Well, I get it, but it's death penalty and it's complicated. And you can't just be a stickler for scheduling if there are legitimate issues that come up in a death penalty case. Period. End of sentence. You don't want a mistrial based on something you screwed up because you rushed to the courthouse. You don't want a mistrial because you screwed up and you didn't take precaution to make sure that it wouldn't be an appellate issue later, which throws out your long sought after trial result. You think that people are going to be poisoned by Dateline? Wait until you have a mistrial and a retrial. Like, ask the Karen Reed jurors and lawyers and judge how frustrating it is for them, to have a retrial based on a trial that was, completely played out already in the public.
Yeah.
So, I love the fact that he's a stickler for rules. It's great. But he also has to know there's a death penalty at stake here. So he's just got to accommodate for all of the possibilities. And I really believe, honestly, Brian and Taylor has thrown in motion after motion that I thought was nuts. And I don't think this one would be nuts if she said that Dateline has poisoned this pool. I want this evidence pulled from the trial. I would not be surprised.
Yeah, I won't be surprised either, but I would be surprised if he threw it out this late in the game. And it's important stuff. I mean, it seems, it's critical to the case.
You don't think it might push the start date, though, from the 11th of August?
I don't. I really don't. I'm telling you, the way that he is just he is crossing his I's and crossing his T's, dotting it out. I don't know. And the way that they talked today about he wants to know where the witnesses are staying, what hotels he wants to know where the lawyers are staying, because he's going to have the hotel on standby in case he has to sequester, and then with the Airbnbs where the victims are staying. Like, I just don't see them setting all of that up. And you're right. I mean, if a legitimate issue comes up, the law's the law. But he wants to, I mean, they've already, what days he's going to have off, he announced today in the 3 months. Like, he's got it figured out.
I wish he took my summer schedule into
I know. I brought that to him during the lunch break. I said,
Ashleigh's
she really
annoyed.
likes to go to Canada.
Okay, the other thing is, one of the things he did today to try to accommodate for the Dateline issues, he decided on 2 additional alternates.
He did. So in court, he never mentioned Dateline in court, but you could tell he was annoyed about leaks, and he talked about a special prosecutor possibly coming on to investigate what happened. But then he said, he was talking about jurors, and he said, I want to add 2 more alternates because of what happened on Friday, which Friday was the Dateline episode. And it didn't really click with me at first. Like, I was kind of like, what is he talking? And then I thought about it, and I'm like, oh, he's talking about Dateline. Like, he's thinking they need even more of a backup because all this information got out.
In my many, many decades of being a reporter, I have seen my fair share of, preservation of documents requests, right? You basically get an email from your boss says, don't delete anything. A lawyer has just notified us that we may be sued over a story, so don't delete anything. You're not allowed to delete. The other side has said, don't you delete anything because we're going to subpoena emails, etc. And it sounds to me like a request, to preserve digital information went out to everybody, the police, the prosecutors, everybody. They all have to preserve their emails, their communications with outside agencies, because they want to ferret out who leaked. Do you think, though, honestly, do you think they're going to find anybody in Idaho, anybody with the Idaho system, prosecutors and police, that was the source of the leak?
I'm curious what you think. My personal opinion, I thought about this today, is I don't think they're going to figure it out. I mean, there's so many people that have been involved in this case since the beginning. Moscow PD. Remember, FBI set up their crime lab. They brought a whole truck and a whole little city into Moscow, and they were all there. There were all sorts of people. Idaho State Police. You've got Pennsylvania State Police from when he got arrested. So I don't know. I mean, are they really going to be able to track it down with all those people? I don't know. I think it's
What are you going to do? Search Kohberger?
You've had sources. It's like you're very careful to protect the people that are giving you information,
Absolutely. You would never email the stuff or text the stuff. You have a conversation. You meet in a garage, deep throat style, nobody's dumb enough to well, I shouldn't say nobody's dumb enough, but typically, good sources wouldn't be emailing stuff to a journalist because they know that stuff's traceable. But it is just it is interesting that they're going to try to ferret this out, because I'm thinking, okay, well, what does that do? You're spending a lot of time and treasure finding the source of the leak, which you likely never will. And then what?
Or maybe it's just to send a message. Do you think it's to send a message? Look, we got 3 months to go before this trial, enough. But they've been so tight. I mean, I've been reporting on this. I've gotten to know so many. This is not a kind of case where it's been easy to get information. I mean,
it's been the worst.
It's hard. These people do not leak in Idaho. So I don't know. It's going to be tricky.
Yeah. Is it ever? I don't think they're going to find the source, because I think the source just said something and didn't write something. So preserve all the data that you want, all the emails and texts that you want. I don't think it's going to be in there. Okay. Talk to me about this notion in court today where Judge Hippler looked at Bryan Kohberger's lawyers and said, I get it. And I'm going to paraphrase here because this is not the judge's, choice words, but I get it. You want to point the finger at someone else to take the heat off of your client, the defendant, Bryan Kohberger. You want to point to someone else being the killer. Well, we all know that you can't just walk into a courtroom and say, I didn't do it, Brian did it. Because it ruins Brian's life. And if you're only just trying to deflect blame off yourself by ruining others, that ain't just. So you have a higher standard than that. And Judge Hippler has a standard for Bryan Kohberger's lawyers. So first answer, if you would, Brian, how many alternate suspects are they talking about? One or plural? And then number two, how will we know if they're allowed to start pointing the finger at other people?
Yeah, so they call them alternative perpetrators. That's the official language here in Idaho. And it's all part of the process. They had until the day before yesterday. They had till yesterday to, which would have been Wednesday, whenever people are listening to this, to file their motion. The defense did about who they believe the alternative perpetrators could be. They filed the motion, and I kept checking the site, kind of knowing that they were probably going to seal it. Because like you said, you're suddenly putting names out there of people who haven't officially been accused of anything. So they did file it. It came up in court today. The judge acknowledged that he got the filing and said that, I wrote this down, said he said to the defense, he wants evidence rather than allegations. So he didn't seem to think that it was a meaty enough motion and enough evidence there to say that these people who they believe could have done it that weren't Bryan Kohberger, that there was really any evidence. And he said another hearing now for, I think it's June 18th. It's going to be a secret hearing where the defense can come back and say, here's more info. And ultimately, by the way, it's not like then they go arrest these people. They're just trying to be able to bring it up in trial.
Yeah, and create reasonable doubt. Could have been somebody else. Could have been Dave, could have been Mike. Could have been Sarah. I'm making those names up, of course. So here's the thing. I was trying to go back through as much of the evidence as I could remember in the last 2.5 years, because I feel like I have forgotten more than I remember at this point. And I remember there was evidence of some kind of a blood speck on the hand railing of the staircase inside the home. And it wasn't blood of any of the roommates. So I wondered if that is a basis for one of Ann Taylor's suppositions that whomever had a blood speck on that hand railing could have also been the killer. But it's the hand railing from the bottom floor all the way to the second floor. It's
possible. And I don't know, from what I understand, there's specific names that they've come up with. So it's not just a theory of it could have been someone because of this. they're naming names is what I have heard.
Well, could the defense have tested that blood and done a genealogical study and found the owner of it?
Maybe, yeah. But remember, again, we talked about this when that happened, but it's a party house. There are a lot of people going in and out. But if you think back, and I don't want to name any names because we've never had any reason to believe that anyone else was responsible. But there were a lot of names that came up in the beginning when you and I were covering this before they arrested Bryan Kohberger.
Food truck guy? Remember that?
Yeah. So they're probably going back through all of that stuff, I would imagine.
Okay. How about the glove? There was a mystery glove that was found outside the home, I believe, as well, that the defense made hay of. Maybe the owner of that glove?
Yeah, but think back, and again, he's innocent until proven guilty. I don't want to be saying whatever. We got to be fair. But I mean, Bryan Kohberger also likes to wear gloves. I mean, that's come out. He's a germaphobe. So I always thought about that with that glove too.
Well, I'm sure we're not going to find out unless it becomes public record and they are allowed to bring it up at trial, because these things will be in a secret hearing, like you said, in June. And if the judge says, sorry, you don't have anywhere near the kind of supportive evidence to bring up that, assert that in a court of law and ruin those people or that person's life.
Yeah, which
forget
is fair,
it. Yeah, and that, I guess that would stay sealed. Maybe after, if there's a conviction of Bryan Kohberger, maybe after they would unseal that and say, this is what the defense was trying, but we know we've got our guy. I mean, I can imagine that.
Possible, yeah.
Okay, the other thing that I was fascinated by, and I don't know quite how I feel about it. I'm trying to put my emotions in check. But Bethany and Dylan, the surviving roommates, have just been so assailed online by trolls and just ne'er-do-wells and just bottom of the barrel scum who've attacked these victims as being somehow, I don't know, complicit or a part of it, whatever it is. It's just garbage. And obviously that's very hard for them. And the judge has agreed to limit our ability as the public to witness their testimony. Tell me what the judge decided when it comes to Dylan and Bethany, when they take the stand.
So he said that their portions will not be on the live stream. So you will not be able to see them unless you're in the courtroom. But the audio feed for them will continue to go out. So you'll be able to hear their testimony if you're watching at your house or you're watching in the overflow room, but you will not be able to see them. He also said that he is going to reserve 2 seats in the courtroom for them. He considers them to be victims.
Wow.
And if they choose to attend the trial one day or for the whole thing, he's going to make sure that there are 2 seats reserved for them. And
so
also,
they even before they testify, they're going to be allowed in the court.
They didn't mention that. That's a good question, because a lot of times, obviously, they don't want witnesses in the courtroom before they testify. They didn't bring that up, but he said that he's going to have 2 seats for them. And it was kind of interesting. So they got through that. And then the defense spoke up and said, oh, but we have people that we also want the video cut for, like people who worked with Bryan Kohberger and then, maybe undercover officers. And it was interesting. The judge was not very open to that. He said,
good.
I'm not going
this
down.
This is a public process. Unless you're a minor.
You would have loved. I actually thought of you when he said this, Ashleigh.
What?
I'm not going to quote him directly, but he said something like, when they started making those requests, look, the only way the public is going to trust this verdict and believe in this verdict is if they feel like they've been able to watch the process. Which I really believe too, So, but it was just interesting because Ann Taylor immediately was like, oh, we got this person and this, you know what I mean? He was just like, you can make a filing, but he's like, I don't want to do that.
Look, it is. I do fully respect the fact that Dylan and Bethany have just had the boots taken to them, and they are victims. I mean, they will never be the same. They are damaged for life by what they've been through.
Yeah.
I'm not even talking about the survivor's guilt. I mean, I'm just talking about the hell that the internet has put them through, the hell that they've witnessed, the hell that they've lived through. But I am a big. I'm a big proponent of an open process and of witnesses taking the stand and saying in open court so that we can see them and trust in what they're saying, what their truth is, right? Yeah. Look, you know how we're all animals, us people. We have instincts. How many times have you said, look me in my eyes and tell me that? Because that's how we determine truthfulness. We look for tells. We look for gut instinct. We look for all those things. It's no different on the stand. It's why you take the stand facing everybody, so that we, as the public, can understand if we believe you're telling the truth or not, right?
Right.
So I do have a problem that for that reason, they're going to hide Dylan and Bethany from the public. I do understand the reason, but I also say, they're not minors. They're adults, and they're important to the process. They are important to the possibility that a man may lose his life over what they say.
At the end of the day, the jury is going to be able to be sitting right there and see them, and they're the ones who are going to make the decision. So I guess, that's probably what's most important. But it is a slippery slope, I think.
I have great respect for juries, but I believe that we have the right to keep an eye on things, a la O.J. Simpson case, that jury and what they did and what we discovered 30 years later, that they wanted to, get one for Rodney King. I mean, that's the kind of thing where the rest of us have a vested interest and we have a right to be in there. We're paying the process. It's our process. It's a government for the people.
Yeah.
And the court is part of that. So anyway, I'll go off on the soapbox forever about that. I also heard somewhere, and I don't know where Judge Hippler came in on this, that at one point he was going to allow Dylan and Bethany to dictate whether or not they should be live streamed. Like if fine, they can be on, but if they decide no, then they won't. Did that go out the window?
No, he didn't say that. He just said that he made the decision that they weren't going to be on, that it was just going to be audio. The thing he was leaving up to them was whether they wanted to take the 2 seats. That part he just didn't seem to know the answer to.
So today was supposed to be the last hearing before trial, which I thought was weird because trial is still 2 months away. I mean, jury selection begins, I think, on the 30th. I think it's a Wednesday, and it starts on that Wednesday, the 30th. It was supposed to start on the 29th, but I heard it moved today to the 30th. Don't know why. And then jury selection's expected to take a couple weeks, with trial testimony beginning on Monday, August 11th, right? That's the schedule so far?
Yeah.
So how on earth...
I was confused about it first, by the way. Like, have you heard of that? Like, I always thought jury selection started with the first day of the trial.
Well, technically, the first day of trial is
totally
literally the first day of trial technically is jury selection, right? So when you say the trial begins, it really should be the jury selection. But most of us refer to the trial began when Cassie took the stand, or, like the very first witness or something like that. She wasn't the first witness, but and so the evidentiary phase of the trial begins on August 11th, where you start getting witnesses, you start seeing exhibits, you start seeing evidence, etc. You get the openings, but jury selection's 2 weeks prior to that. I just don't understand how we're at why they would announce this was the last hearing, because we've got all sorts of issues to sort out before then.
The way I think that came about is because it was the last hearing on the docket, and all the media was just seeing it as the last thing before. There was nothing else scheduled before today. So it became kind of a headline, like the last hearing before. Whereas today they've already scheduled another hearing for June, and there's probably going to be another hearing, So I think that it seemed like the last because it was the only one posted,
Yeah. No, I sense that we're going to have, I really do think that Ann Taylor's going to lodge a complaint, file a motion to have that evidence that was elicited in the Dateline episode thrown from the case. But I'm with you. It would be a travesty to see that kind of evidence thrown out just because jurors got to look at stuff. I mean, plenty of cases have gone to air with a lot more.
I mean, there's no gag order. They see all sorts. I mean, I guess I just don't really follow the... I mean, like, again, will it make jury selection harder? Yes. But, I don't follow the argument of just throwing it out.
Me neither. But then again, it is death penalty. And when you got a case like that, the stakes are really high and things change. And then, the other thing is, not everybody understands this, but it's not just picking a jury. It's picking something called a death qualified jury. So in Diddy's case, you heard all the, the voir dire and everything in Diddy's case, and it took, forever to get that jury seated. And that was not a death qualified jury. You're just trying to get biases and, personal histories and background and all the rest, right?
Yeah.
You do all that in Kohberger, and you've got to have a death qualified specialist on your team who knows how to elicit from a potential juror if they can condemn a man to death. I mean, it really, truly is like, can you look across at a living, breathing person 10 feet away from you and say, thumbs down, he dies? And they have to be able to do that.
Yeah. And it was interesting, like what you just said made me think of this. Today, I've seen Bryan Kohberger a lot of times, like starting out in Pennsylvania when they made the arrest, and then saw him when he got off the plane in Moscow, and then went to the hearings in Moscow where you're super close to him, and then have been seeing him in Boise. Moscow, I was so close to him. Here, you're still maybe like 10 feet away. But I've noticed, like, he's got Ann Taylor, who's, a female attorney, and then he has two other female attorneys, and they sit on each side of him, and they get very close to him, like almost whisper in his ear. He whispers back. They don't want us to hear what's going on. Before the judge came in, there's a little bit of smiling. They're clearly making a little joke with him or something. And it was just a weird thing to think of him, what he's been accused of, and you're thinking of, gosh, this man could be capable of this. And then like sort of seeing him in these just human, normal moments with these women who are sort of like humanizing him and just treating him like any other guy on the street. And just when you said the death penalty thing, it made me think of it like, I don't know if they do that by design. Like, I know there's not a jury in there yet, but like, is that part of sort of making you feel like this is just any other guy?
Absolutely. It's why they're not supposed to be wearing jailhouse jumpsuits into court now, because it just makes them look like criminals right away. I'll tell you something. I have always gotten skeeved out by that, because I know we give the presumption of innocence, but when you have overwhelming evidence that there's a Dahmer or there's a Charles Manson at defense table, you can't believe that anybody wants to get close to that filthy skin, Yeah. And in this particular...
a genuine little laughter and a genuine... if I was next to you and I leaned into you to tell you a little something and just we had our little moment, like that was happening. And it was weird. Like, I can't help it. Felt weird,
There's a great book that I think was written by Mickey Sherman, who defended Michael Skakel many, many years ago. I think he wrote a book called How Do You Defend Those People? And it's a question we all want to ask a defense lawyer. Like, you represent the scum of the earth, You represent these guilty people. How do you do this? Like, especially when they're horrible people. And you've always got to come back to the Constitution and like how incredible this country is, that we instantly give you the benefit of the doubt and we prove that you're guilty before we lock you away or we kill you, And so as a lawyer, you really have to believe in those principles. And maybe that's the principle that brings them to innocent until proven guilty, even when I'm standing right next to your, skin that I may or may not believe. And perhaps, honestly, Casey Anthony's lawyers believe 100% that she is innocent. At least Cheney Mason does, right? Thinks she's a great girl. I don't believe she's innocent. I don't think she's guilty of what many of the prosecutors lined up in that courtroom, but I think she's not. I think she's guilty of causing Kaylee's death. I just don't think she was a premeditated first-degree death penalty eligible murder. And so those lawyers were able to be very cozy with her. And maybe that's what Ann Taylor feels. But it's hard to look at some of the evidence and see how overwhelming it is. And I'm trying to imagine myself as Ann Taylor and be so snuggly and cozy and put on a really strong face. Yeah. Because already he comes in at a disadvantage. Everybody knows that that's the guy, you know?
Yeah, there was this point, I think it was a couple months ago, where she made this statement in court where she said, like, Your Honor, he is innocent. She like made it almost very personal that she believed herself that he didn't do it. So, yeah, I don't know. It was just, and I totally agree with everything you said, by the way. I mean, that's what's great about our country. My dad's a criminal lawyer. Like, I grew up with this stuff. Like, criminals are, they deserve a right to representation and innocent until proven guilty. But it's still weird when you're sitting there and
I don't know that I could do it.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could do it. I would enjoy the project. I would enjoy the project of defending someone because that's what we do as a society, and looking for everything. Because I did feel once, I'll give you this one anecdote. I did a story for Dateline when I worked for NBC, and it was about this cop in Rhode Island who was accused of killing his mistress, right? He's married. His wife is pregnant. They've got, I think, 2 or 3 other kids, and he's got a side hustle. And the woman who's the side hustle is found dead in her apartment. Her head is bashed in with a jewelry box. And in the apartment is a letter that she has written saying, I'm going to tell your wife. If you don't tell her, I'm going to tell her. And she shows up dead. And then he was, he was a really bad cop. He was involved with a lot of bad cops that had sex in their cruisers. They were all cheating on their wives. They arrested him, and like suddenly the tapes disappeared, and they gave him kid glove treatment and said nothing to see here. And the night of the murder, he had left a cop party for several hours and come back looking like a ghost. Like everything pointed to him killing that woman. And he was convicted, and he exhausted all of his appeals, and he was going to be in prison, life, no parole. And Brian Entin, if you can believe this, a random carpenter walked into a police station off the sidewalk and said, I can't live with myself anymore. I'm the killer of that woman that you put that cop away.
Oh my
And
God.
that was my epiphany in this business, to say, don't for a minute think you got it figured out. Even when the evidence looks so overwhelming, there's always a chance, you know. It may not look good. It may not look like it's too coinky dinky. But there is that chance that everything looks bad, but it wasn't him.
That's so crazy. Yeah, that's a good perspective. It's a good thing to remember.
It's the way we all really need to behave
Yeah.
when we're covering these cases. Like, there is always a chance, until it's irrefutable and you saw it with your own lion eyes.
Right.
You can't know everything. So it's just one of those things. Okay, last thing, because I know I've kept you really long. What are your thoughts now as we're in this final stretch? Like, we're getting there. We've waited so long. The families have waited so long. They are all very different. These victims' family members are all very different in how they approach this. But what are your thoughts as we get ready to really watch this play out in public?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I can't believe it's finally here. I guess I think of the families a lot about what this is going to be like for them. I don't think I've wrapped my mind around the 3-month thing. Like, I've never covered a trial for 3 months. I don't think I've wrapped that's a really long time. You know what I mean? Like, we just keep saying 3 months. So I think I'm still sort of processing that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, it almost doesn't feel real yet that it's actually, we've just been covering it for so long. I mean,
I think 3 months is short, because
Do
it's
you?
4. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
tell you why. Phil Spector was, I think, 5, and OJ was 9, and yeah, I mean, and Casey's was 2, and I feel like there's 4 victims here, and there's so much digital evidence in this day and age, just like we've heard, terabytes of digital evidence that has to be sorted through and dealt with. I also think that each murder has to be dealt with as well, and all of the evidence that's extraneous in that house. It was a party house. There are thousands of people who've walked in and out of that house over the years and left something behind, some trace, hair or dandruff or something. And so just trying to get all that sorted through.
Yeah.
That's not the same in your house. It's not the same in my house. But that house was different, unique, and bizarre. So I just feel like, 3 months, I feel like that's quick.
well, you'll think this is interesting. This came up in court today. They talked about it a lot. The prosecution has created an exact model of the house, like a replica. That's already in the courthouse. They said it's already in the Ada County Courthouse.
Like a miniature?
Like a miniature, but I think it's kind of big the way they described it. And it's on a different floor, and we didn't see it, but the defense has already gone down and inspected it and has approved of it. And they called it the dollhouse a couple times in court. And then the prosecutor stood up, and even the judge called it the dollhouse, which I did think was kind of weird. And then the prosecutor was like, listen, I don't think we should call it the dollhouse anymore. I think we need to just call it the model based on what happened there. So and then they all agreed, like, yeah, we need to stop calling it the dollhouse. But so that was just kind of interesting. Like, so there's going to be like an exact model replica of the house. And then they even discussed that the defense didn't want it to stay in the courtroom at all times. So they agreed that they would wheel it out and then wheel it in, like, when they need it.
I don't know how the jury's going to be able to see if it's the size of a dollhouse, and you're halfway across the courtroom. I don't know how you're supposed to actually see the detail you need. I imagined that the way they were going to depict this house was through a digital tour, because those are very good nowadays, and that would be very helpful. I'm still so upset that they took that house down. I think that this was the one case where, is there any case out there, this is the one where the jury should have gone on a go-see. They really should have. There's so much to Dylan's position when he's walking towards her, and then he's taking a right past her door, and then another right outside the kitchen doors.
Yeah.
That house took me through sleuthing online, real estate listings and photographs and testimony and affidavits. It took me weeks to figure it out. It's
And
a
not
weird
just the
house.
Then even you and me on the phone the other night trying to figure out the new surveillance video. That area is a strange, weird area, packed in with college apartments and duplexes and triplexes and weird. It's weird because it's all little college kids living in all little alcoves.
Alcove at this house,
Yeah.
as everybody's seen the image with the parking lot out front, faces Queen,
Yeah.
not King. So everybody
King,
thinks
yeah.
it's 1122 King Road, but it actually faces Queen. And
That's right.
and King is like on the side that Xana's room was on. There's barely even a window that faces way out past other
Yeah.
houses down to King Road. It's very complicated.
And
That's
you would
why I
think
thought
they
this
would
was a
also wanna
visiting
see
place.
How he got up there. I agree with you. I think they would have, of any case, a jury visit would have really been impactful, I think.
I agree. Well, listen, there's nobody better than you at doing this kind of work for a number of reasons, and I'll just blow your horn for a minute here. You have such incredible empathy. You tackle every story that you do, not just as a reporter, as Brian, and you tell every story that you tell as Brian, and it's really helpful to people like me because you're like a translator of the complex. You take these complex things that you've collected all day, and then you give us like a bedtime story, which really makes sense, and it's easy to remember, it's easy to process, and it's easy to understand. And so for that reason, I just think there's just no one better in the business
thank you.
as a
You're the
reporter. So I, for one, am glad to work with you. I'm also just thrilled that you're on this story because it is going to be a marathon. Thanks for doing this tonight.
Thanks, Ash.
Love you.
Love you too.